Danny Flexen for Seconds Out. Delighted to be joined by friend, former colleague, and of course the editor of the UK's only print boxing publication these days, Boxing News. Matt, how you doing?
I'm good, mate. How are you keeping? It's a bit odd, isn't it? We haven't done this for a while. I had a one-on-one meeting.
Yeah, I'm sure this one will go better than the majority of those ones did. No, it's good. I like the backdrop, as we were saying off camera. Well, not off camera. I wouldn't have seen it, but you get my point. Especially the teddy bear. He can come and join us at any point.
Yeah. Watch out for him.
It's like the setup of a creepy horror movie, but it's good. Story that I already know, but a lot of people out there won't, I'm sure will be intrigued by, is how you first got into boxing. What started this lifelong love affair?
Yeah, it's kind of a long story, not a particularly illustrious one, really. But my first memory of it is that when I was a kid, I kind of fell in love with boxing. I've got memories of watching boxing on the television and just being absolutely enthralled by it. My parents will tell you that was the only way they kept me quiet, is by watching boxing. And I think the first fight that I really remember being absolutely fascinated by would have been Dwight Mohammed Carway against Leon Spinks. I think it was 1983. Carway handed out Spinks a horrible, ferocious beating. And I still really remember Carway sticking out his tongue to Leon Spinks. And I just found the whole thing absolutely fascinating. Now, I doubt that was on live at that point, but I presume it would have been on one of the Saturday afternoon shows. I just really enjoyed that. And then moving on from there, I went on holiday. I think my dad and I were supposed to be taking a trip to Blackpool. I can't even remember the circumstances of it, but we got to Blackpool fairly late in the evening, I remember. And all the hotels were full up. All the bed and breakfasts were completely full up. So my dad then made the decision to take us on to nearby Morecambe, and it's pelting down with rain. It's a miserable night. And as I'm sure you remember, when you're about 7 or 8 years old and you're being dragged here, there and everywhere, and you've been in a car, you're not a happy kid. So my dad took me into a newsagent's to get me something to kind of lighten the mood a little bit. And in there, I was greeted by, in a rectangular box, a Muhammad Ali figure. And it just, again, that I just found it wonderful. And it had with it a punch ball, had a little suction thing on the end, which you could punch down. And then he had the lever where his arms would move. And then so I was just chewing my dad's ear off all that weekend about Muhammad Ali, what did he do? And I kind of got a bit of insight about Muhammad Ali. And it was then that I found out my granddad, who was my dad's dad, he was a lifelong boxing fan, boxed a bit in the army. So then on the way back from Morecambe, we stopped off at my granddad's house. And I just, again, continued that conversation with my granddad, who could offer me more information. Left his house with the Muhammad Ali autobiography, which I think was published in 1975, the greatest, with a yellow cover, and also the Henry Cooper biography, which again was from the 1970s. So I went off with those, read those, and then I think after that would have been when I had one of my first gift vouchers, and with that I bought the Pictorial History of Boxing, the famous book, which is kind of a lot of fans go to even now, Sam Andre and Nat Fleshier. Thoroughly enjoyed that. And then boxing magazines kind of came into my existence. I think the Ring magazine may have been the first one, with Don Curry and Marvellous Marvin Hagler on the front cover, sharing the 1985 Fighter of the Year award. It was a pink background, very odd, but I still remember it vividly. And I think the first Boxing News that I had Terry Marsh on the front. And from there, I was just absolutely hooked on the sport, absolutely adored the sport.
How soon was it before you knew that it was going to form such an important part of your life, not just as a fan, but in terms of your career? Because you tried boxing briefly, didn't you, as well, in the gym?
Yeah, I mean, I did various points in my life. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I ever boxed. I mean, I think that's something that's a very sought after and highly respectable thing to say. I never boxed. I trained a bit. I sparred a bit. A gym in Kimver. There was one in Great Bar with Al Malcolm, the guy who fought Lennox Lewis in his debut. And then again, I did a bit later in life at Southampton, the gym there with, I think was it Tony Hill, the guy?
Former Southern champion or challenger.
Yeah, that was it, yeah. But no, never boxed, and knew quite quickly that was not the route for me. I mean, when I was a kid, at this point, as while I was digesting all this information, I would be writing my own history books and drawing my own pictures. And it was something that I always dreamed of doing. And I had a few bits published in local papers. as I was growing up. But then as I got to about the age of, I think probably 16, 17, as any red-blooded male can attest to, other things kind of became a little bit more important in my life, shall we say, like the opposite sex, like pubs and clubs and all the demons that come with those particular places. And I ended up falling into, I didn't do as well as I'd like to have done in my A-levels, fell into a retail career. And I remember I was 24 years old and I was managing a shop at Birmingham University, already well aware that this was a complete waste of my time. And it was a very, very rainy day. There was a delivery of confectionery, which came, and I was wheeling this crate of Mars bars and everything else. It came off the path, toppled into a field, and all these boxes just went everywhere. I remember just kicking one of them and just absolutely disgusted with myself at what I'd come to at the age of 24. And at that point, I decided to readdress my ambitions. And I went to university that September. I didn't start university until I was 25. I did broadcast journalism. But it was during that time when I was at university, and you kind of are given freedom, particularly with as you're working towards the end of the degree, of what will be the subject of the projects. And a lot of them I was tailoring around boxing. And at that point, I made the decision that my future would be within the boxing industry somehow. And that was, so it was at that point. So I managed to get a first class degree in broadcast journalism at university. And then I just started badgering various people for a job. And eventually KOTV then responded to one of my emails, asked me in for an interview. And yeah, then the journey began.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm a bit disgusted at how you treated the chocolate, to be honest. I don't think chocolate should ever be wasted in such a manner, however deep the hole is that you're in yourself. But that aside,
I've always been more of a crisp man.
Yeah, fair enough. But it's quite a similar kind of pathway. I was managing sports shops before I got into the boxing side in terms of a work thing, and I went to university late as well. So it's interesting. You kind of, it's something that grows and grows. It never quite leaves you, and eventually, I think you're sucked in. There's no way out of it.
No, absolutely, and that's the thing. And you know, I'm sure you've had it. I'm sure lots of people that work in the industry have had it. You'll have those days where you think, I don't want any part of this sport anymore. I can't deal with this sport anymore, and that's not down to the boxers or anything. It's just the industry in general. It can be quite a disheartening place to be, but you very quickly realise. I mean, perhaps never more so than this period we find ourselves in, how much you adore and live for the sport, and how much you miss it when it's not there. And yeah, I mean, from an early age, it's been a huge part of my life, and I don't think it'll ever go away.
I think it's talking to other people as well, like normal people, if you like, people that go to work in an office and maybe don't work in an industry they have any affinity with. And you realise just how, I'm not going to say lucky because we work hard and stuff, but just how rare it is to get up every morning and do a job that's connected with something you love to do. You know, people always say that's the dream, but you don't find it very often. The majority of friends that I've got or people in my family go jobs and they take pride in it and they do well, but it's not necessarily something they've dreamed of doing or something they take that passion from.
No, exactly. And I think there is an element of luck. I mean, we've all worked hard to get where we are in this industry, and it's not really one that's going to make you that rich, really. At the end of the day, we certainly don't do it out of hoping to kind of retire early or anything like that. It is, but I think there's an element of luck because there's not that many jobs there. There's not many full-time jobs in boxing journalism, in boxing media. So I do believe there's an element of luck, but yeah, it comes down to hard work. And the vast majority of days, I realise how lucky I am to be doing this. Because you do, as you say there, you speak to some people and they can't wait for 5 o'clock to come along so they can shut down their computer. They can't wait for the weekend. And okay, press days on a Tuesday are a chore. They're still a chore in lockdown. But this job isn't a chore. This job isn't a chore. It can be hard work. It can be grueling, but it's not a chore.
Yeah, no, I agree. And when I was out of it for however long it was, a year and a half, and I mean, I was still writing features and stuff, but I wasn't working full time in the industry between NewsQuest and SecondsOut. I absolutely missed it, and I couldn't wait to get back to it as soon as the opportunity arose. It is something I think that, I don't know if I'll be working in boxing for the rest of my life, but if I'm not, I think I'll still be involved in some fashion, because it becomes like an addiction, although, without the negative side effects of most addictions.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. But you're right. I mean, I remember speaking to Eddie Hearn just before the first Anthony Joshua Andy Ruiz fight, this time last year actually, and speaking to him in detail, and he kind of mentioned that when you're that deep into boxing, it is an addiction, and he said to me, he said, "You're addicted to boxing," and it was the first time I'd really thought of it in that way. But we are completely addicted to this.
And on that note, just tell us about the transition from KOTV to Boxing News, because obviously I saw it from the other side. I was working at Boxing News when it was still with NewsQuest at the time, and we saw both yourself and John Dennon come in around the same time. Tris Dixon was the editor then. Just tell us about how it came from your side, from the application through to starting on BN.
Yeah, so I mean, I had a great time, and just to give you a bit of background on KOTV, so there I was, started off kind of as a runner, and I was taking tapes to London and everything else. They were based in Southampton at the time, so I was kind of taking tapes to London and kind of tidying up their database and this, that, and the other. And then within, I think, do you know what? On my first day, it was an absolute dream, because they've got wall to wall, a huge like room of all these tapes. Most of them, a lot of them hadn't been viewed. So my job was really to watch these tapes full of boxing and just basically log what was on each of them. And I thought that was fantastic. So within a couple of years, I was producer of KOTV. So I kind of had free reign on this. And at this point, I must thank Nathan Duncan, because he was the first person really to take a chance on me. He still owns the company, which is still doing well. But within a couple of years, I was the producer. Now what would happen with KOTV, and those might be some that are familiar with the show, is that the shows were not live, but you would get in essence a magazine show that would run through results maybe a week or so after they'd happened. Now we didn't have the financial clout to get the top ranked shows or the biggest promoters of the time or anything like that. But what we would get is almost free reign of all these other shows, and I would be looking through all the fights, deciding what were the good fights, and it was a massive help for my boxing education, because I came across fighters and fights that you wouldn't normally hear of. But going through that process, what I found was that my passion really, as it always had been, was in the writing. So I would take great pleasure in the writing of the scripts, as well as the half-an-hour show. We'd do the hour-and-a-half documentaries and various things like that. And I took the greatest pleasure from actually writing the scripts. And it was during that time that I wasn't saying I was in a hurry to leave, but I was certainly thinking, what's my next step? What do I do now? And reading Boxing News every week as I did, then there was an advertisement, I think in the news pages, if memory serves me correctly, for a reporter and an editorial assistant. So I thought that I would try my luck with the reporter. I thought I had a bit of experience. So I applied for a reporter, and it was quite a while before I heard anything back. I think it was a couple of months. And then all of a sudden the name Tris Dixon kind of plonked into my inbox and said, if you're still interested in this. And whether it was an excuse or not, or whether they'd been through every other potential applicant and none of them, and then I was kind of a last resort. But the excuse was that my application had kind of gone missing, but it had reappeared at the top of the pile. And so I went along in the first instance to meet Tris. I mean, before that, I had to submit, I think it was before when I had to submit a couple of pieces of written work. And I can't remember what it was now. One of them was probably a piece with Al Malcolm. But anyway, I went along to meet Tris, and it was in Salisbury, and which is where he lived, and I think he still lives now. And it was in a pub, and it was on a weekday evening, and I just saw this huge figure standing in the doorway of the pub, and just remember thinking, who on earth is that? I mean, bear in mind I'd only ever seen Tris's byline picture in Boxing News at that point, and I wasn't remotely expecting this this muscly, monstrous mass that was there, stood there waiting for me. So that was a little bit intimidating, but very quickly we got on well. We had a chat about boxing, what I thought I could bring to the team. And he asked me then to interview Danny Williams. So I spoke to Danny Williams. I sent that in. And then I think I came in to meet Claude. I had to do a few other bits. At that point, I wasn't aware that Claude was leaving, because I think he left in the December. Yeah. I think this kind of whole process was going on around the November of 2009.
Yeah.
And then around that time I was offered the position as reporter. And I remember when Tris phoned me and said, I'd like to offer you the job. I was at work at KOTV, and then I'd like to have, and as I was saying thank you, I could hear my voice kind of breaking with emotion. I was over the moon, absolutely over the moon, to get this position. And it was a great shock to see then in the Boxing News. I think it was the Christmas edition of 2009, with Claude publicly announcing his resignation. And I had tremendous respect for Claude. And so it was a shame that I didn't get to spend more time with him. But at the same time, it was wonderful to work with Tris. And again, Tris is someone else who I owe a huge amount to for again, someone else who took a chance on me, who saw something in me, and I'll never ever forget that for what he's done for me. And then on it went. It was wonderful. It was great fun. I remember those first few weeks. I remember going into the Boxing News archives and doing various bits. And within the first few weeks, I was on the phone to Angelo Dundee and you just pinch yourself. You just absolutely pinch yourself. Who am I to be on the phone to the trainer of Muhammad Ali and Sugar Ray Leonard and all these guys? And yeah, it was great. It was great fun.
There's kind of two key things I remember about when I got the call to join Boxing News. One was that I was at a birthday lunch, or my birthday lunch it was, for the company I used to work for. So it was the British Medical Association. And we were in Giraffe, one of those brilliant chain, food places. And I got called out of the birthday lunch to get the news, which was great, obviously, birthday present. And the second thing I remember is Claude, who was the one who imparted the news, asking me what was the lowest salary that I could realistically live on. And me not having kind of the savvy at that time to lie and actually being honest and saying, well, I could take this, which was a pay cut from what I was earning, and him saying, yeah, that's fine, that's what we'll pay you. And I really kind of regretted that for the first year that I hadn't gone higher, but probably the only part of it that I regretted. And the thing that really did it for me, and maybe it's because I've got an ego, but finding out how many people, shocker, isn't it? Finding out how many people had initially applied for the role. It was editorial assistant role when I started. And I think Tris and I were the final two. He got the job. And then when someone else left a few months later, I got invited onto the team. And just knowing how many people had wanted that job and getting picked makes you feel kind of special. And I'm guessing it must have been similar for you and John when you guys joined, that, it's a magazine that so many people love and so many people would give their right arm to work for.
Yeah, it was exactly that feeling. It really was. And yeah, it was bizarre. And I think I remember my first day, and Nick Bond, who well, wonderful human being, very, very talented guy. But I remember Nick Bond, grilling would be too strong a word, but he then kind of, he invited me into the kitchen to make a cup of tea with him. And then he started, really trying to find out exactly how much I knew about boxing, not in a remotely rude way, but he just wanted to know who this new guy was on the team. And Nick and I kind of bonded pretty much then. But then the first job actually was to write the obituary of Ernie Smith, the Welsh journeyman who had taken his own life, I think, in the days before I started. And that was as wonderful as starting the job was. You then realise, hang on, you're dealing with some really serious stuff here. And being on the phone to Robert Smith, who wasn't long the new General Secretary of the British Boxing Board of Control. And I just remember, and it may have been my own insecurities, but feeling a little bit, hang on a minute, Robert Smith doesn't want to talk to me. He's a little bit suspicious of who I am. I mean, Rob and I get on great now, but I'll never forget that first conversation. Who's this guy phoning me up asking about Ernie Smith? And I was probably asking some quite difficult questions, because I think there were some suggestions at the time that he had kind of taken his own life, and that had been a consequence of his boxing license being taken away, and this, that, and the other. So it was a difficult conversation we had. yeah, I just felt it was an enormous step up for me. And one for a while that I thought, I don't know if I can do this, but it was, at the same time, it was a huge thrill.
I can say honestly that from the start, we all thought you were great. Not just you, but John as well. Great additions to the team. I don't think anyone ever kind of doubted how good you were or how dedicated you were. But outside of the office, there were some critics in your early days, just as there were to me in my early days. I think for me, it was more kind of a bit of a kind of crass insensitivity when it came to speaking to certain people, which probably still exists today. But for you, it was more your elaborate writing style, which I always really enjoyed. But there were some critics out there, particularly on the forums, which I'm sure we both had experience of. How much did you kind of take that to heart in the early days when you were still kind of finding your feet and probably didn't have the self-confidence that you've got now?
Yeah, I mean, I look back on that now. I think it's hilarious, and it absolutely knocked me for six. It absolutely knocked me for six. But it wasn't so much in the early days, because I remember when I first, after I'd been there a few months and I'd done a few features and everything else, there was some very positive reviews on the forums. And back then the forums were like kind of social media now, weren't they? That's where everybody went to kind of to get their voices heard. And there was a lot of positive reviews. Someone even said, "Oh, this guy could be the new Thomas Hauser," and things like that. So I was just like, wow. And I think I just got completely drunk on that. And so what was, I look back now on some of the articles that I used to write and the way that I used to construct them, and I cringe a little bit. And I just think that
we all do, not yours.
We
all do about it.
And I just think that with the compliments and everything else, I was perhaps for a time trying too hard. And then, I can completely understand why people didn't particularly like that. But then all of a sudden there was this, there was the forum post where I was the head of it, and just like, is this the worst boxing writer ever or something like that? You can still, it doesn't take a great deal of effort to find it. You'll still find it. And but I mean, at the time, it's exceptionally hurtful, because you're putting your heart and soul into it. And and I think kind of the root of that particular one is that I'd made a mistake. I'd referenced Chad Dawson or something like that, and I think I'd put that he was unbeaten, and he wasn't. He'd lost to Jean Pascal. And I remember writing that article, and I think it was when we were short of a front cover. So we decided that we were going to put Joe Calzaghe on the front cover. And I did this kind of, which I always used to get lumbered with this kind of these fantasy fights and what have you. And I remember one of them was Joe Calzaghe against Chad Dawson. It was guys that he hadn't fought that perhaps he could have done, or something along those lines. And one of them was Chad Dawson, and I just mentioned that Chad Dawson was unbeaten in light heavyweight, when of course he wasn't. He'd lost to Jean Pascal. But what people didn't realise is that, I don't even know why I'm bothering to defend myself on this one. I really don't care. But it was put together so quickly. But it was, and then there was just this torrent of, he's rubbish, he's shit out of the job, and all that. And in answer to your question, it does hurt. But now, I mean, if you're trying to please everyone, you're not going to please anyone. It is what it is, and ultimately, if people are taking the time to write something about you on a forum, be it good or bad, it's a perverse compliment in a way, because they're reading it and they're taking the time to form an opinion. And okay, even if it's not a good one, at least they're taking that time to pay attention.
How often back then and still now do you get contacted by aspiring writers, boxing journalists, asking for your advice in terms of how to get into the industry?
I mean, not so much back then. I mean, I would do, but no. I mean, now, for example, if not on a daily basis, then frequently throughout the week, I will get messages on LinkedIn. I'll get messenger requests via Facebook. I'll get direct emails with people who will either be sending me something to read and asking me their advice on it, or what I think is a slightly more lazy way of doing it is, how do I get into the boxing industry? I like boxing and I like writing. How do I get in? And if I've got the time, I will respond to most of them. But I think, without being too judgmental, I think if the email, if my name is spelt wrong or there's several blatant spelling mistakes in the email, you kind of think, come on, if you can't even get that bit right, you're not gonna get much further. And I have often responded to these people and said something like that without trying to hurt anybody's feelings and trying to be supportive. But it's you do wonder sometimes. I think that this is a very difficult industry to get into, even more so to stay in. And if you can't spell, you're going to struggle. you are going to struggle. But I think people will read something and think, I could do that. And now and again, I will get something from somebody, and there's so much potential there. There is so much potential there. So you want to help those people along. But ultimately, we're looking for something that's a little bit different. So, I mean, I heard Tris say something on something recently. I'm not sure what it was. It might have been on his own podcast where he was forever being inundated with kind of opinion pieces about why Floyd Mayweather isn't fighting Manny Pacquiao.
Right.
When what does that what's the point in publishing that? You want something that's different. You want someone that stands out from the crowd. And now and again you'll find it. Now and again you will find it. But there's absolutely no substitute for hard work.
I used to get so many queries about how to get into the industry, and at first I thought it was kind of that they just thought I was terrible, and that if anyone could get into the industry, it was me, so I could kind of give them the shortcuts, because obviously someone had given me a chance, even though I wasn't good enough or whatever. Yeah. But I don't know, it's hard because, like you say, you want to help everyone, and you try and kind of guide them through, but at some point you have to turn around and say, you don't need any help with the boxing side, it's just basic writing, and how much help can you give to that? We're not English teachers after all. And it's just difficult. A lot of people out there as well seem to think it's like a boxing knowledge exercise. We know more about boxing than you, so we're more qualified to write about it. And writing, obviously, is a skill in itself. So that's the tough bit. But all that being said, what's the kind of key, if you had to give out one piece of advice for all these aspiring people, and in the hope that saying this on this video will, convince a few of them not to clog up your inbox, and what's a key mistake that you see a lot of them making when they have these queries or try and navigate their way into the industry?
I think just I get a sense that people, and this is one of the first things I remember. I used to buy something, and I used to get it when I used to do a bit of freelance writing when I was a teenager. Something called the Writer's Handbook. And it might sound silly, but within that Writer's Handbook, there used to be a list of all the publications that accepted unsolicited material. And within that, it would give you the word count for certain articles. And with certain publications, it would give you what kind of material they're looking for or whatever. Just familiarize yourself with, first of all, the publication, what we do on a weekly basis. Generally, the magazine is split into sections. There's certain things that we do. There's certain things we'd clearly be looking for. If we've just published an interview if we've just had a 4-page feature with Charlie Edwards, for example, 2 weeks ago, chances are I won't be putting in another Charlie Edwards feature in the next issue. So kind of do your homework in that regard. See what we've been doing. Another example, again, that springs to mind, there was this article that someone sent me. Oh gosh, who was that guy who beat Frankie Gavin, Bradley Skeet, and lost to Abanesian, the Spanish Hector? Oh,
Lejaraga.
That's it, yeah. So there was prior to his loss, so he was kind of undefeated. This nice prospect. So I got an article through that was. There was the intro was lavish, even by my standards. It kind of went on to about 1,000 words. The whole piece ended up finishing at about 5,000 words. But within that 5,000 words, there was some really nice sound bites from him. And he'd spoken to him, he got on a one-on-one, he got an exclusive, and I spent a long time going through that, highlighting what bits we could potentially use, perhaps restructure it in this way, and just send it back and said, just keep in mind, we generally, for a 4-page piece, you need to be working towards about 2,000 words.
Sure.
So I spent a couple of hours doing that, and then I just got a response saying, "Oh, right, okay, I'll try somewhere else then." So you just kind of think, well, what's the point? So basically, know what boxing news is about, and have some kind of concept of what the boxing news audience is. And an exclusive is always great, but opinion pieces, unless you're right up there at the top, however well written they may be, they're not generally what we're looking for.
Good stuff. And when you first started at Boxing News, or at least within the first year, did you see the editorship as a realistic goal? Not necessarily based on yourself, but just on the fact that BN at the time didn't seem to change editors very often.
No, it didn't even cross my mind, to be honest with you. Certainly not in the first few years. I thought that, obviously aware that Tris had just started. And I didn't think, and as you mentioned there, it's kind of historically the editors stick around for quite a long time. So it didn't even enter my mind, to be honest with you, until Tris kind of took me off to one side and said that he was leaving, which would have been 2014, I think. So yeah, of course you're ambitious. You're always thinking, well, what's the next step? But no, it didn't really come into my mind until Tris told me that he was leaving. I thought he'd be there for a long time. I was aware he was unhappy towards the end, but no, I didn't. It didn't occur to me that was what I was going to do and what I was going to end up doing.
And in the same way, you remember clearly where you were and what was happening when you found out you got the initial Boxing News job. Do you remember when you found out you were going to be the latest editor of such a prestigious, historic publication?
Yeah, I do. I remember, and it was quite a long-winded process, wasn't it? Yeah. You and I were kind of going for this job, weren't we? And you were given the job as publishing manager, was that right?
Yeah, at the time, yeah.
Yeah, and I was given the job as editor. So, so I found out at the same time as finding out that I was editor, I found out that you were my boss.
It's a double-edged sword.
So it was a bit,
yeah.
But no, I mean, in all seriousness, at the time, to be the editor of Boxing News, even now, it's an incredible honour, and I think it's a title that you must respect at all times in everything that you do. And yeah, even now, I still struggle to believe it sometimes.
And it's going to be hard to encapsulate this, but what's the kind of best and worst parts of being the editor of Boxing News?
Yeah, I mean, the best is kind of the best is going all around the world and covering the best fights of your era and being ringside and getting to witness them so close and being involved in fight weeks and spending time with the boxers that you have so much admiration for, that you're in awe of, really. And also not only the boxers that are active today, but to pick up the phone. And today I've exchanged messages with a former world champion and everything. And even then, when you see your phone go and you see the name come up of who it is, you're kind of like, this is, and they're calling you mate and everything else. And it's great. It is. It's a wonderful position to be in. And there's a lot of respect that goes with being Boxing News. You feel that the people will treat you with a lot of respect, and that, that's wonderful. That really is, and you never ever take that for granted. That's wonderful. The worst parts of the job is that, particularly now where it's long since just been a case of putting together one magazine and going in, writing a column, putting some pages together, and then off you go, and your week is done. it is all consuming. It is all 24 hours, 7 days a week. And it's very hard to explain, because even though I may not be at work, I always feel, as the editor of Boxing News, that I need to know, absolutely, even though it's impossible, I can't know everything that's going on in the boxing industry, but I feel I need to keep abreast of everything. So I'm constantly looking at social media, constantly looking at what must now be deemed as our competitors. What are they doing? Reading what they're doing. And things will bother you late into the night, in the middle of the night when they wake you up, early in the morning, that perhaps I'm not doing the best job that I can. Perhaps I've missed out on this. Why didn't we get that interview first? Why didn't we do this? And it niggles away at you. And, I'm kind of loath to complain about it too much, because as I've repeated here, that it's a massive privilege to be where I am. At the same time, it would be nice to be able to just take a step back from it now and again and let it completely forget about it. And you don't have that. And in a way, this whole lockdown process has been, as much as I've missed the day-to-day of the boxing madness and everything that goes with it, it's been very pleasant to just know that I'm not going to be missing out on a big fight announcement if I just put my phone away for a few hours and that sort of thing. I'm not going to miss out on this massive news. So that's been kind of refreshing to have that time. But even on my honeymoon, which was in 2016, and we purposely, and my wife is very, very understanding of my passion for boxing. I mean, she realizes that there's my daughter, and then just very, very close behind is the sport of boxing, as ridiculous as it sounds. And so the wedding was planned for August 2016, and August historically is the quiet season for boxing, particularly in the UK. But then as we were going out to the honeymoon, I realised that it was whether the Olympic boxing was on. So I was nipping off to bars and this, that, and the other to watch the Olympics, to watch the boxing in the Olympics. So yeah, I guess that the way that it just consumes every last bit of you would be the worst part of the job. And along with that is, and I think that any editor of Boxing News, and we recently published at the end of last year the 110 years of Boxing News, and I was keen to get as many editors involved in that as possible. So there was interviews with Graham Houston, Claude, Triss, obviously, and what have you. And I think many of them mentioned the fact that you just by expressing an opinion or just by interviewing someone, you'll be upsetting someone else. And yeah, every single one of the promoters, each of the two big major promoters, have been pissed off with me in the last few years. And I can honestly say, hand on heart, that there was not one of those occasions when they were pissed off me when that was the result that I wanted from whatever I was writing or whatever I was putting in the magazine. You never think, right, I'm going to write this, I want to get right on their nerves. But I will always be honest. I will always be honest as I possibly can be. And sometimes honesty upsets people, or whatever else, or opinions upset people if they don't agree with that opinion. But it won't stop me from being exactly as I am in the future.
What about kind of running Boxing News within a wider corporate entity? I mean, I know BM was recently sold from NewsQuest to Kelsey, so it's probably slightly different now. But I know when I was still there and it was part of NewsQuest, there was always a bit of a friction or a conflict between the needs of Boxing News and the wider needs of the publisher. Has that been something you've kind of struggled manfully with at times?
Yeah, and I think you know that. I think you know better than anyone what the struggles there. I mean, the thing is with Boxing News, it is very much a niche. It's a niche title, and it's very rare that you're gonna the publishers will have the understanding of the industry or understand the potential in certain areas of that industry that you understand. And unless you can guarantee an immediate return in those areas of potential, then you may not get the backing that you would want. So yes, it's been a struggle. That I'll agree with you. It has been a struggle. But unless you're working for someone that shares the same vision as you, that can see and understands the boxing industry like you understand it, you're always going to encounter those troubles. Ultimately, 110 years after the first issue was published, I'm just delighted that Boxing News is still here.
And as I said at the start of the interview, it's now the only print-based, at least, publication on boxing still in the UK. Kelsey Media owned both Boxing News and Boxing Monthly, and recently wound down Boxing Monthly. Kind of an inevitable decision, in my view, from a business perspective. But for someone like you, who's read Boxing Monthly from quite a young age, I didn't. I always read Boxing News until I was an adult, and still read Boxing News after that. I'm not saying I grew out of it, but you get my point. I didn't read Boxing Monthly till later on. How did it affect you when you realised it was not going to live past this year?
It affected me in many different ways. I was, when Kelsey came on board, and I knew that Kelsey were involved with Boxing Monthly, I hoped that we would work together. I would hope there would be some relationship we could build between Boxing News and Boxing Monthly, and I believe that was the intention to start off with. So I was really excited about that. I mean, there's some wonderful, educated people that work that used to write for Boxing Monthly.
Thanks.
But it would have been an honour to work with those guys. And so I was very sad from probably, I suppose, quite a selfish point of view there that was not going to happen and that relationship would not develop. But also, as you mentioned, I had a tremendous affection for Boxing Monthly, and I think, if you read the column that I wrote when the news broke about Boxing Monthly, was that I won't ever forget walking into the newsagents in Halesowen, where I was from, in the West Midlands, and there on the shelf was this rather fearsome picture of Mike Tyson emerging from the shadows, and I think there was that number 1 glossy Boxing Monthly or something like that. I can't remember. And just the excitement there, and within that there was these fight reports of, and this is all pre-internet days, so there was fight reports in there of fights that I didn't know had happened. It was far more immediate than the likes of KO Magazine, World Boxing, Boxing 89, Boxing Illustrated, The Ring. Not as immediate as Boxing News, but it just had a different feel to it, and I really enjoyed the format, and I continued to enjoy the format, and I enjoyed reading it right up until the end. So yeah, I mean, it was a great shame to see that go. I mean, I knew how much the guys at Boxing Monthly put into it. Obviously, the obvious one is Glyn Leach, who obviously since passed, and he passed that down to everyone else there. And Graham, I thought, was doing a great job, and what Mark Butcher was doing, and the other guys there. But I suppose from my own point of view, going back to my own personal feelings on it, then you start to think, well, hang on. Boxing Monthly has gone, and then is Boxing News the next to go?
Yeah.
And I did see some things on social media, and there was, it was the Boxing Monthly has now gone, and there's more than one comment underneath, well, now I fear for Boxing News, that's going to be the next thing to go. So of course you fear that. And I think ultimately you have to, the media world has changed enormously since the day I first walked into the Boxing News office in 2010. It is continuing to change, and Boxing News has always strived to move with it. And although it pains me to say it, the printed word is in dire straits at the moment. I hope that people come to realise the importance of it. I think I have nothing but respect for what you guys do at Seconds Out, and I'm aware you do the written stuff as well. But I know you the majority of your traffic, I presume, will come from your videos. I have tremendous respect and affection for what Coogan has done at IFL. Rob Tebbett is doing a glorious job at Boxing Social. But all of these things really stem from what they're doing video content wise. Now, I'm not going to knock that. I'm not blind to the benefits of a video. Boxing News was doing it many years ago. 2012, I believe, we started BNTV, which is now reformed under someone else, but BNTV used to be Boxing News TV. That's something that we used to do. And it wasn't because we didn't make the decision that we were not going to do it anymore. But when you're producing a 48-page magazine that takes a tremendous amount of work and also is what brings in a tremendous amount of money, it's difficult to make the case for you should be spending more time on something that initially isn't making that money. But I'm well aware of how important videos are for Boxing News' future, and how important the podcast is for Boxing News' future. Again, this is something that we had great success with in the past, but it wasn't an immediate monetary gain. But I'm well aware of that. But what bothers me a little bit about it is, and again, no disrespect to these people that I've just mentioned before, but I do find I'm a little bit bothered by, you put a microphone under somebody's nose or camera in someone's face, and really you're just kind of amplifying the noise a little bit. And I'm not saying that that noise shouldn't be amplified, but if you can put a 45-minute interview with, say for argument's sake, Eddie Hearn, and Eddie Hearn will say some wonderful things, will say some great things, but ultimately it's just what Eddie Hearn wants you to hear.
Yeah.
It is effectively a promoter's platform. It's a promoter's voice. Is Boxing News going to do that? I think there's more value in what we do, in that we want Eddie Hearn to have his point of view, but perhaps it's not the only point of view in the story.
Yeah.
Boxing News will still work exactly. Boxing News will still work exceptionally hard to deliver the stories, to deliver the facts, and to present those to the readers. But all that said, we had some very exciting plans for 2020, with things that I've been working hard on behind the scenes for a long time. That myself and John Dennon, the excellent online editor at Boxing News, that we've been working on together, and we were hoping to get them launched. In fact, we were supposed to get the date for the podcast to go back out there was, I think, the second or third week of February or something like that. That then coincided with the new publishers coming in, so there was various meetings going on then. And then, of course, once we'd eased into that process, then the whole country's in lockdown. Sure. And I don't really see the point in, as much as this video will no doubt be the best video anybody's ever seen. I'm not a massive fan of these lockdown videos in people's homes. You know, you're doing a great job with it, Danny. I know you've done something like 100, 101, 102, whatever.
102 now, yeah.
Yeah. So I think the time to launch it is when boxing is launched again, and then we can get back on with what we're doing. But we've got lots of exciting plans for the future. But predominantly, I just hope that the written word, and I've gone a long way about saying it, the written word is exceptionally important, I think. Otherwise anybody can just say anything. I just sometimes feel that all you need is a loud voice, a popular voice, and they just need to, within what they're saying, they just need a headline, and then you've got a story. And more people will view that story than something with a great deal of substance and with meaning. If you look at what Boxing News has done over the last few years, we've produced investigations on drugs, on gloves, weight-making processes, the sanctioning bodies. We've even investigated the deaths of certain fighters. Is anybody else doing that? But I'm not naive enough to think that millions and millions of people are reading this. I know they're not. But I believe what we're doing is very, very important. I'm not saying there's not a place for these videos, which I understand people need that immediacy and they want that. And these videos are very, very entertaining. But there will always, I hope, be this place for the truth and integrity.
I completely agree with you. I think one of the advantages BN has is that you are now alone in the market. And for us, not just Seconds Out, but for all the video channels, as much as people want to be a bit more critical and a bit more challenging, I think if the promoter or the subject, the boxer, whoever it is, decides that's not the line of questioning they want to go down, they can just shuffle you out, and there'll be 5-10 video channels that spring up in the meantime to take your place. It's just exploded now, and it is as simple as you said, getting a famous person, putting the right tagline to it and sending it out into the world. And you know it's going to get a certain amount of views, regardless of if it's contextualized, regardless of if it's challenged. And it lets a lot of misinformation out there. I suppose it's the kind of Donald Trump effect, if you like. Not that I want to compare any of our promoters too closely to Donald Trump, because I'll probably get a legal letter tomorrow. But you know, you get the point, and it is difficult in that sense. Whereas Boxing News, being the only print publication still on the shelves over here, really, you get that people take you more seriously, I think, than the video channels. I think although you might not get the same amount of views, you then become an influencer, you become a thought leader. And what people read in Boxing News then sparks questions that hopefully will be asked by the video journalists down the road.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I mean, I guess the kind of moving forward that we need to, we want to implement our own videos, but just do things a little bit differently. We're not gonna, I mean, and as you have just said there, we've done it before where we'll queue up at a press conference to talk to someone, but you'll find that you almost think, what's the point? If they haven't already said it, they're not going to say it.
Yeah.
Or if they haven't already said it, they don't want to say it, or they're bored out of their minds themselves. And you end up with this situation where you've got 25 YouTube videos out there with people saying exactly the same thing. So we won't be doing that. We'll be doing something different. But there's a place for it. But as you say, yeah, I think Boxing News and the things that it's doing, and we have had tremendous success with our digital following. I think we've got one of the biggest digital footprints in the industry as a consequence of our social media. And that, again, going back to Nick Bond, my interrogator in the kitchen in the early days, is thanks to what he's been doing. And he's done absolutely wonderful work with Facebook, which is 2.5 million. We're closing in on 1 million for Instagram, and closing on 200,000 for Twitter. And they're huge followings. We've got a very, very substantial and loud voice in there, so we get heard. And the long term with the paywall that we've got, and this might be getting a little bit too technical, a little bit boring for people that are watching this, but with the paywall we've got, again, that wasn't an overnight plan. We had millions of people looking at the website, and I didn't for 1 second think, okay, we'll put a paywall up. In the morning I'll wake up and we'll have 1 million new subscribers paying £5 a month. That was never the aim. But what we are seeing is very substantial. We're seeing some real encouraging progress with that every single month with people that are paying for it. And in years to come, I think journalism, the quality of Boxing News, you will have to pay for it. You will have to pay for it. And you only have to look at what we've achieved in regards to Sports Journalism Awards in recent years. In the last 4 years, we've won 5 awards. That is normally a monopoly of the dailies. And Boxing News has broken and won 5 awards in 4 years. The Boxing Writers Association of America, last year we did exceptionally well with the quality of our journalism and the various writers, and we've done it again this year. The quality is there from Boxing News, and it's a long journey for us. We're only just getting started, but all the things that I started to put in place are now starting to work for us.
Just before I let you go, just a couple of quick ones. Article that you're most proud of, interview that you enjoyed the most, and toughest interview.
I don't know. I think, article I'm most proud of, I really don't know. I think looking back, I mean, there's been a few fight reports where I've read them back since and thought, actually, that was okay. That was all right. Do some of the columns, I think, which have been the most challenging to write, have been perhaps ones that I'd be most proud of. So in the aftermath of, say, Mike Towell's death or Scott Westgarth's death, where it's almost like a rallying call to the industry, I would say I'll be most proud of. What was the next one? The interview I'm most proud of?
Well, the interview you most enjoyed and the toughest interview.
The interview I most enjoyed. I mean, there's countless. I think the interview I got the biggest, off the top of my head, the interview I got the biggest kick out of was Johnny Tapia. And I got to spend some time with Johnny Tapia in Las Vegas, and then we kept in touch via the phone, and there was a few articles that I did with Johnny, and then we were talking about books and things like that for the future. And so that was that. You know, it was with great sadness when he died and what have you. So yeah, I got a big kick out of that. I think perhaps my my favourite selection of interviews would have been in the early days at Boxing News when I went off to the WBC Champions event, and I stayed in Cardiff for about 5 days and stayed in the same hotel as George Chuvalo, John McGarby, Jeff Harding, Shannon Briggs, and that was to this day, that's still my favourite week. And just spending time with those guys and having dinner with those guys every night and getting to know them, and yeah, that was and I produced some articles I was quite proud of at the time from that period. And the most difficult interview has surely got to be Derek Chisora.
I was hoping you'd say that.
The first time, I mean, Derek and I, I'd like to think that we get on quite well. I spoke to him recently, a couple of weeks ago. I spoke to him in lockdown. I've got a great admiration for Derek Chisora. He reminds me of like some of those great 1970s heavyweights and what have you. I think he's a real throwback. And I think if there was any justice, he would win a heavyweight belt, a major heavyweight belt. But anyway, on this particular occasion, which was just before, I think he was due to be fighting, I think it was Vladimir. I think it was the aborted Vladimir Klitschko fight, and that had just been announced, or it was getting very close. And so I went along to spend the day with him in London, and he brought along a life-size cardboard cutout of Vladimir Klitschko, and was carrying that around with him. And he kind of had this kind of newfound celebrity status. So the person he was least interested in on that particular day was the Boxing News reporter. He was more interested in this. He had camera crews following him. So trying to get a straight answer out of him, or even a sentence, was beyond difficult. And in the end, he just left me. He went on to the London Eye, and I was just stood at the bottom of the London Eye, kind of waiting for Chisora to return. And in the end, I just thought, actually, I've got better things to do than this. And I just wandered off, and that was the hardest. That was the hardest interview. But we've since had far more fruitful interviews since then. But you know, with Derek, it really is whatever day of the week it is, and what mood he's in, and what have you. But just like to stress, nothing but respect for the man.
I was chasing an interview with him recently, and I'd gone down loads of avenues, kept getting dead ends, and realised at some point that he'd followed me on Snapchat, and I hardly ever even use Snapchat. So I followed probably about 3 people or something. But yeah, so we were following each other. And I started messaging him on Snapchat because he put videos on this. So I knew it was really him. And seemed to be getting on really well. I said, let's do this interview, blah, blah, blah. He said, oh, yeah, give me your number, bro. I'll call you, all of this. Freaking brilliant. So I was out in the garden a couple of weeks ago, shadow boxing in the garden, which must have looked completely psychotic in itself. And the phone starts ringing, and it's Derek Chisora. So I've got him on speaker because my old phone didn't work properly, so it had to be on speaker. My neighbour's in his garden, kind of listening in. He's like, yeah, bro, what are you up to? I was like, oh, yeah, I'm just shadowboxing garden. Oh, well done to you. I was thinking, oh, this is going perfect. I said, well, how about we do an interview this afternoon? Yeah. Who is this again? My heart just kind of sunk. It's like, oh, it's Danny from SecondsOut. Danny from where? Oh, yeah, Nicole's heard of you. Yeah, okay. Yeah, call Nicole, bro. Click. It was like from a big breakthrough from an unexpected source to back at square one. But we eventually did do the interview, and it was great. But yeah, he's a very kind of enigmatic character, I think is the best way to put it.
Yeah, good way.
My neighbour has
newfound
respect for me now because he thinks, Derek Chisora is a friend of mine, so it's great.
Makes up for the shadow boxing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm sure he'll be like scarred by that forever. Before I let you go, last thing, just message to fans, readers out there about what they can expect from Boxing News for the rest of the lockdown, and then when boxing eventually resumes.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'd just like, if there are any Boxing News readers out there watching, just thank you sincerely for the support that you've shown during lockdown. It's been immense. We've done much better than I ever anticipated in lockdown, particularly with half the shops being closed. So thank you for that. Thank you to subscribers. Thank you to subscribers for continuing to show that support. And we'll continue to do what we're doing. I mean, there's been a massive good feeling about what we're doing. It's been perhaps a little bit guilty of doing history lessons every week, but what else are we going to do at this point? We've got a lot more of that to come for the next few weeks. And of course, we'll be covering everything as we always have done. And a lot of exciting things to come for Boxing News. And thanks again to everybody.
Brilliant. Well, we thank you for joining us. It's been a great fun, trip down memory lane, and also look into the future. So it's been brilliant. And really appreciate it. Stay safe, obviously, in lockdown, and we can't wait till boxing's back and BN's back doing what it does best.
Cheers, Danny. Appreciate the time, mate. You take care.
And you, mate, take care. Speak soon.
Sure.